Ella stood in a deep red gown at the edge of the ballroom, her fingers wrapped tightly around the microphone. The room glittered with chandeliers and white roses, full of wealthy guests clinking champagne glasses. 6 months ago her parents forced her to marry a man named Jake, someone they claimed would humble her. They blamed her for ruining the family's reputation with a failed business and told her she needed to learn her place. Her mother, Margaret, had whispered during her dress fitting, "This is where you belong after what you did." But none of them knew the truth. Jake was far from ordinary. His bank account had more zeros than the entire Carter family fortune. Tonight, Ella planned to reveal everything. The anniversary gala, thrown to honor her parents' 35 years of marriage, would be remembered for something else. She looked out at the crowd, calm and determined. "Before I share how I brought my family to their knees," she began with a small smile, "I have one question. Have you ever been underestimated by the very people who should have believed in you?" A hush fell over the room. "Where are you watching from today? Kindly hit like, comment and subscribe to this channel for more." Growing up as Ella Carter meant knowing how to smile in pictures, speak politely to donors and never, ever embarrass the family name. The Carters lived in a mansion on Beacon Hill, a house with marble floors, chandeliers and a grand staircase that everyone called the showpiece. Her father, Richard Carter, built Carter Development from a small real estate office into a powerful company with projects across the East Coast. Her mother, Margaret, ruled over social events with the sharp eye of a general. She planned charity galas, hosted elite dinners, and made sure their family stayed in every society column. "Posture, Ella," her mother would whisper, poking between her shoulder blades during events. A Carter woman never slouches. Ella's younger sister, Lily, followed her like a shadow. "Teach me how you do your eyeliner," Lily often asked. "Mom says I'll never be as graceful as you, but I want to learn." Margaret played them against each other, praising one while quietly criticizing the other. Still, under the competition and pressure, Ella and Lily shared an unspoken bond. Both were trying to survive their mother's impossible standards. Margaret's closest friend, Evelyn Walsh, was always nearby at events, sipping champagne while watching Ella like a hawk. Evelyn, whose family owned shipping lines, never worked a day in her life but acted like the queen of etiquette. "Ella, darling," she'd whisper at fundraisers, "that young man you were speaking with, his family runs those discount furniture stores, don't they? How refreshing." Ella had learned to smile through those comments, knowing they'd be reported back to her mother. Until age 26 she played the part perfectly. Ivy League degree, top marks in business school, and a position waiting at Carter Development. She wore designer clothes, dated men from the right families and followed every rule. Then she did something unforgivable. She tried to start her own business. "A boutique," her father said, peering over her proposal. "Oh, we're real estate people, not shopkeepers." "It's a fashion curation concept, Dad," she explained. "Emerging designers, market gap research. There's a solid plan here." He sighed and set her file aside. "Fine. I'll fund your little shop. Maybe you'll learn a lesson in sticking to your lane." For a few amazing months, Ella's boutique, called Ella Grace, became a hidden gem in Boston. The space was minimalist, modern, and full of talent. She and her business partner, Rachel Green, built a buzz. Fashion bloggers visited, local designers reached out, and sales were better than expected. Rachel ran the operations. Ella handled the style and client relationships. But one day the accountant called. "Miss Carter," he said carefully, "the accounts are empty. Vendors are unpaid. We're missing over $300,000. Rachel vanished. Later, Ella learned she'd faked documents and stolen the funds. She wasn't even Rachel Green. She had 2 other names and a history of fraud. The local newspaper ran a headline, "Carter heiress scammed in boutique debacle." Margaret's friends began whispering. Richard's business partners stopped taking Ella seriously. "Did you even check her background?" her father yelled at a family dinner. Her mother didn't shout, she just looked disappointed. "You've humiliated us," Margaret said coldly. "You're lucky we're not pressing charges ourselves." Within 2 weeks, Ella's life was stripped away. Her apartment, owned by Carter Development, was taken back. Her credit cards were shut off. Her Mercedes disappeared, replaced by an old Honda Civic. "Something more suitable," her mother said with a tight smile. Ella was moved into a guest room in the family mansion. At every dinner, Someone mentioned responsibility, or learning humility. Her cousin's business success was praised loudly across the table. Some people know their limits, her uncle commented, glancing at Ella. What hurt the most wasn't the loss of things, it was the loss of herself. She, once proud and independent, now felt like a child under punishment. She applied to job after job, fashion houses, consulting firms, magazines, but each door shut. Some even belonged to her father's connections. "We appreciate your interest," they'd say, "but it's not the right fit." Behind the polite words, Ella heard the truth. "You embarrassed the Carters. We won't risk it." Her designer clothes stayed in the closet, untouched. Her days became a blur of shame, silence, and bitterness. One Tuesday evening, Ella walked into the living room and immediately knew something was wrong. Her father, Richard, sat stiffly in his leather chair. Her mother, Margaret, perched beside him with a polished smile that never reached her eyes. A stranger stood near the fireplace, holding a folder and wearing a plain gray suit. "Sit down, Ella," Richard said firmly. Ella froze. "This is Mr. Parker," Margaret announced in her usual businesslike tone. "He's here to help us resolve your situation." The man stepped forward and offered a handshake. "Jake Parker," he said calmly. Ella didn't move. Her stomach turned. "Your father and I have made a decision," Margaret continued. "This can't go on. You're not functioning independently. We've spoken to Theodore Parker, our attorney, and his son Jake has kindly agreed to an arrangement." Ella blinked. "Wait, are you saying you'll marry Jake?" Margaret said flatly. "He's respectable. You'll have a place to live and you'll take an entry-level job at your father's company. That's the offer." Ella's mouth dropped open. "This is a joke, right?" Richard's expression turned cold. "Refuse and you leave this house with nothing. No references, no support, no connections." Margaret added with a soft sigh, "Your father's heart can't take any more stress, Ella. Think about that." Shaken, Ella ran upstairs to her sister's room. Lily sat on her bed in sweatpants and a Carter prep hoodie, twisting her graduation ring. "You knew, didn't you?" Ella asked, her voice trembling. Lily looked down. "They've been planning this for weeks." "Why?" Ella whispered. "Why marry me off to someone I've never met?" Lily spoke quietly. "Because if you marry Jake and take a humble job, they can turn it into a story. The daughter who made mistakes but found her way back. It saves their reputation." "Who even is Jake?" Ella asked. "Some financial consultant. He works for a small firm. Dad likes that he's stable. Mom likes that he's forgettable." "This is insane," Ella muttered. "They're sacrificing me to clean up a mess they helped create." 3 days later, she met Jake for dinner at a modest restaurant. He wore the same plain suit and drove the same Honda Civic. After dinner, he offered to show her his apartment. It was neat, functional, with nothing fancy. "This isn't ideal," Jake admitted, "but I think we could build something functional." "Functional," Ella repeated. "That's your sales pitch?" He didn't flinch. "Would you prefer I lied? We're both doing this for practical reasons." "Why are you even agreeing to this?" Ella demanded. Jake didn't answer right away. His phone buzzed. "Excuse me," he said, stepping into a separate room. Through the thin wall, Ella could hear his voice, calm, commanding, not at all like the quiet man she'd just eaten dinner with. She leaned toward the door, curiosity growing. There was something strange about Jake Parker. The next day, Ella did something desperate. She called Tyler, her ex-boyfriend from business school. They hadn't talked in months, but he'd reached out a few times. They met at a quiet bar. Tyler looked as polished as ever. Custom suit, Rolex watch, the same confident smile. "This marriage thing is insane," he said after hearing the story. "They can't really expect you to go through with it." "They're using Dad's health as leverage," Ella muttered. Tyler stirred his drink. "What if there was another option? Someone they already approved of? Like me?" Ella stared at him. "You'd marry me?" "Think about it," he said, his tone suddenly more businesslike. "We were good once. The Carter name would be valuable. It could work for both of us." In that moment she realized he didn't love her. He saw her name as a benefit. A deal. After leaving the bar, Ella walked 6 blocks in heels that cut into her feet. The night air felt sharp and cold. She realized something heavy. Her value to people like Tyler, or even her own parents, was tied to her name, her connections, her family status. Without that, they saw her as damaged. The final blow came during her wedding dress fitting. Margaret stood beside her as the seamstress adjusted a plain ivory dress. "The Parker boy is doing you a favor," Margaret said without looking at her. "You should be grateful. This match is where you belong now." Ella caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. She didn't see a bride, she saw a prisoner. The woman in the mirror looked nothing like the one who had once dreamed of owning a boutique, making her mark, living freely. "Nothing too dramatic," Margaret told the seamstress. "We're going for tasteful redemption." Ella stayed quiet, her heart pounding. That night she knew, this wedding wasn't about love or family. It was about keeping the Carter name clean. And she was the price. The morning of her wedding arrived with perfect weather. Birds chirped, the sky was clear, and the garden was covered in white roses. Margaret had planned everything to seem modest yet elegant. "Nothing too flashy considering the circumstances," she told the planner. "We're highlighting family values." Ella went through the motions like she was sleepwalking. Makeup covered her dark circles. Her hair was pinned into a tidy bun. The dress, plain and shapeless, hung on her frame like surrender. "You look appropriate," Margaret said, adjusting her pearl necklace. "Remember to smile. Appearances matter." Richard walked her down the aisle with a grip that felt more like control than support. The 50 guests, trimmed from the usual 300, watched with tight smiles and judgmental eyes. Her old college roommate had declined, but not before posting beach vacation photos on Instagram. Even the pastor's words hinted at lessons, humility, and second chances. At the altar, Jake stood calmly in a dark suit. When Ella reached him, he leaned in and whispered, "Just breathe." It was the first kind thing anyone had said to her in months. For the first time, Ella looked at him, really looked, and saw someone calm, steady, and hiding something. The wedding reception was a blur of forced smiles and polite congratulations. "Marriage will settle you," said Margaret's cousin, touching Ella's cheek like she was a child. "Some girls just aren't made for business." Her father's golf partner muttered something about Jake being steady, like he was a washing machine. Ella noticed Jake's side of the guest list. Only 5 people quietly observing. One woman in her 50s, elegant in a navy dress with silver in her hair, raised her glass to Ella from across the room. That single gesture felt more genuine than all the speeches. The wedding gifts matched her new status. Practical kitchen items, budget furniture, and zero trace of luxury. The centerpiece gift from her parents? A deed to a modest apartment and 2 contracts. One for Jake to work in financial services, and one for Ella to work in administration. "Suitable roles," Richard had explained, his voice stiff. "Within your capabilities." They left the wedding in Jake's Civic. No fancy car. No honeymoon. Just a weekend in a small inn before starting work Monday. The apartment was plain, with 2 bedrooms and a view of a brick wall. Margaret had furnished it. Beige everything. The master bedroom had twin beds. "You can push them together when you're ready," she had said with her signature cold smile. "Home sweet home," Jake said as they entered. "This isn't a home," Ella replied, dropping her bag. "It's a holding cell." The next morning, reality hit hard. She stood in the kitchen staring at a coffee maker she didn't know how to use. The fridge was empty. Grocery shopping, cooking, cleaning, all of it was new. Jake watched quietly. "Need help with the basics?" he offered. "Like a grocery list or meal plan?" "Why aren't you upset?" she snapped. "You had to marry a stranger and move into this place." "I've lived with less," Jake said simply. "And I wasn't forced. I agreed to this." That line stuck with her. Why would someone agree to this life? During the week, Jake left early for his supposed job. Ella worked at Carter Development, her father's company, but was treated like a clueless intern. Her supervisor, Jennifer, clearly enjoyed bossing her around. "Your files are supposed to be organized by client, not by date," Jennifer said with a fake smile. "Your father expects everyone to follow company procedure." Ella did as told, but she felt invisible. On weekends, Jake often disappeared for work meetings that seemed way too frequent for a junior consultant. He locked the home office door when he was in it and took calls in a low, confident voice that didn't match his mild persona. He wasn't who he pretended to be, Ella felt it. Then one evening her sister Lily showed up with wine and takeout. This place isn't as bad as I thought, Lily said, looking around. It has character. It has popcorn ceilings and broken plumbing, Ella muttered. Jake's actually kind of impressive, Lily said. He reminds me of Dad before all the money. That comment hit Ella harder than she expected. That night, Jake brought home dinner from a fancy Thai restaurant. Ella raised an eyebrow. This doesn't fit our starter salary budget. He just smiled. Life's too short for bad pad Thai. They ate with Lily, then built a bookshelf together. When Ella's side collapsed, Jake deadpanned, I believe that's what engineers call structural failure. She laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. After Lily left, Ella sat with Jake in the living room sipping tea. Thank you, she said quietly, for being decent to her. And to me. Jake didn't smile. He just nodded. Lily sees you more clearly than your parents do, he said. She thinks you're strong. Strong. Ella shook her head. I'm stuck in a marriage I didn't choose, in a life that isn't mine. Strength isn't always loud, Jake said. Sometimes it's just surviving when everything's been stripped away. Something shifted between them that night. Not love. Not yet. But a thread of understanding. A month passed. One night, Ella woke up to find Jake's side of the room empty. She followed the sound of his voice to the home office door. It was unlocked. Inside she froze. 3 large computer monitors glowed with financial data. A Bloomberg terminal blinked in the corner. Shelves of economics books lined the wall. Jake stood at a sleek desk in a dress shirt and tailored pants, speaking into a headset with quiet authority. Singapore acquisition closes before market opens, he said. Have legal prep the documents. Wilson handles press. He turned and saw her. Good night, he said into the headset, then removed it calmly. Ella stared. You're not a financial assistant, she said. No, Jake replied. I'm not. He gestured for her to sit. Then he pulled out a business magazine and opened to a profile titled The Invisible Billionaire. Ella gasped. The article was about a secretive CEO who built Aurora Investments into a $60 billion empire. The only initials listed, JB Jake Parker, Ella whispered. That's you. Yes. So, you've been pretending to be poor? No, he said. I've been living quietly. I built Aurora from nothing. I value privacy. And authenticity. Then why marry me? Why this arrangement? Jake leaned forward. Because I knew your family. I wanted to see them up close before making major business decisions. When your mother's attorney offered this match, I agreed. So I was... due diligence? Ella asked, hurt. At first, Jake admitted. But then I saw something else. So you... not the heiress. The woman trying to find herself in the middle of a storm. His voice softened. You were more than they ever gave you credit for. And my business failure? Ella asked, eyes burning. That wasn't just my mistake, was it? Jake opened a folder on his desk. Your partner, Rachel Green, has 3 other identities. All linked to fraud. He showed her bank records. Your mother's foundation donated to a group Rachel was connected to, 2 weeks before she approached you. That could be a coincidence, Ella said, but her voice shook. There's more, Jake continued. Your father's associate William recommended Rachel. And he's tied to offshore accounts that received payments after your boutique collapsed. Ella pressed her hands to her face. They set me up? They needed you to fail, Jake said. You were building something outside their control. That threatened their story. Over the next month, Jake helped Ella uncover everything. With the help of Grace, Aurora's strategic advisor, they built a case. Documents, transactions, emails. Rachel had been hired to ruin her. William had coordinated it. Her mother funded it. All to discredit Ella and keep her dependent. Why go to all this trouble? Ella asked one night. Because your success would prove you didn't need them, Grace said. They'd lose control. Then came the invitation. Margaret and Richard's 35th wedding anniversary. Black tie. 7 p.m., the card read. The perfect stage, Ella said. The Four Seasons ballroom glittered with elegance. White orchids, crystal lights, a tribute to the Carter legacy. Ella entered on Jake's arm, wearing a deep red gown by a small designer who had believed in her from the start. Jake, no longer pretending, wore a custom tuxedo. Heads turned. Her parents froze. Margaret's smile tightened. Ella. Jake, she said coolly. How bold you look tonight. Happy anniversary, Jake replied, handing her a donation envelope. Margaret's eyes narrowed at the 6-figure donation amount. Your consulting must be going well. You could say that, Jake said with a faint smile. They mingled. Ella watched the room. Across the floor she spotted Rachel, laughing with William. It was time. When Margaret took the stage to speak, her words were syrupy sweet. Family, she said, has always been our foundation. Then with a generous smile she added, and in that spirit, we've asked our daughter Ella to say a few words. Ella stepped up calmly. Thank you, Mother. Tonight we celebrate 35 years of marriage. Of values. Of family support. Margaret nodded, clearly pleased. That's why I want to share a truth, Ella said. 1 year ago I opened a boutique. It failed. Or so I thought. What I didn't know was that my partner was a con artist. One hired and funded by people in this room. Gasps. The lights dimmed. Screens lit up with bank records, emails, receipts. Rachel Green, also known as Renee Campbell and Rita Chambers, was paid by my mother's foundation. Recruited by William. Protected by my father. The room exploded with whispers. Rachel tried to leave, but Grace's head of security blocked her path. Ella turned to the crowd. My boutique didn't fail because I was reckless. It was destroyed by design. My parents needed me to fall so they could control me, so they could redeem me through an arranged marriage. She smiled slightly. But the man they chose, Jake Parker, isn't who they thought he was. He's the founder of Aurora Investments. Billionaire. A strategist. And someone who believed in me when no one else did. The final slides showed Aurora's valuation. Rachel's fraud charges. William's money trail. Richard stood up, red-faced. This is slander. It's documented truth, Jake replied calmly. And don't worry. Your cardiologist is present. He's on my board. Margaret's voice shook. How dare you hijack this night? This isn't sabotage, Ella said. It's a reset. 1 year later, Ella stood on the rooftop garden of Jake's penthouse, holding his hand in front of 20 guests. They had just exchanged vows, not arranged, not strategic, but real. Kayla stood beside her, glowing in her new job and her own apartment, far away from Carter expectations. Olivia, her designer friend, had created Ella's gown. Simple, strong, beautiful. Grace and Jake's team watched proudly. Her parents had attended, quietly in the back row with no spotlight. Ella had thanked them for coming but asked for no speeches. Their relationship was cautious, based on truth, not appearances. Ella's new boutique flourished. She offered young designers what she never had, real support. I started out thinking marriage would be a cage, she whispered to Jake that night. Instead, it gave me freedom I never expected. Jake smiled. Sometimes the people who try to break you just clear the path for your real life to begin. Together they looked over Boston's skyline, no longer afraid of the future. Moral lesson. True strength is discovered when you're forced to stand alone. Sometimes what's meant to break you becomes the foundation of the life you were always meant to